when you invest your own retirement money, you don't put it all into one stock. You diversify. And I think that's the same idea about selling and sales in general.
Welcome to another episode of Sell Me This podcast. We're going to jump right into things today, and with me I have Samir. Samir, I feel like you don't need an introduction, but for those that don't know you, why don't you just jump right in and introduce yourself to our guests?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate, first of all, being here and having an opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah.
For those who don't know me, I live in Calgary. I have been living in Calgary for the last 8 years. I worked for Export Development Canada. I worked for HSBC before that. I have an own podcast as well. I'm trying to be out there in the market and be with people. I find that potentially a lot of listeners, some of them maybe I'm saying a lot and I'm over extending myself, but I believe that there should be some people who already know me, and hopefully there'll be more after this.
A couple new faces, and
Yeah.
And so you have such an incredible reputation, in general, but also in Calgary specifically, and you're known for a whole bunch of different things. But what are the things that you're probably best known for?
Well, best known for, I would say I'm in the financial industry. So I mingle a lot with other financial professionals, be those with the banks, be those with other financial institutions that are not banks at the moment. And I find that what I do is a bit unique to the market because I'm a trade specialist. And I find that although Canada does a lot of trade, there's a little bit of a gap in terms of specialists who are able to provide advice and guide people on how to go international, go abroad. So I think that's where my main role comes in.
I love it. And so what's kind of your background that led you to that point? Obviously, trade, as we all know, is incredibly important. But like, how did you find yourself kind of specializing in this niche area that's so important to the work that we're all doing?
Well, it's actually an interesting story because I always say, when you're living in the moment, you don't know how the puzzle pieces comes together. So my university, actually, when I finished it, it was the background of it was international commerce and marketing. So I kind of already was in that field. But it was a diplomatic university. I was supposed to be a career diplomat. But then when I came back home to get a job with the Foreign Office, although they paid for my education, I had a full scholarship, they said, you have to pass a test like everyone else. And I said, what if I don't?
Yeah.
And they said, like, there's no obligations for you, which was strange because usually there are some obligations tied with a scholarship. And I thought to myself, I'll go to the banking world. There was a bank that was just starting back home by people who used to work for HSBC. So that got me excited because of that all international branding. Like HSBC for me was a dream when I was younger, and, working at HSBC so many years later was, a dream come true. But at that point, I thought, okay, I'll go to the bank. I started as a teller, started working there, did a lot of different things because the bank believed that you have to work at different parts of the bank to be able to grow yourself as a banker. So I did credit, I did financials, I did relationship management, but I started as a teller. In 7 years, I actually left as head of commercial banking when I moved to Canada. So it was quite a quick career progression. So when I came here, I already had that experience of working with companies, working with them internationally, help them navigate the landscape, because Azerbaijan, that's where I'm from, is positioned right between East and West. So a lot of the clients I work with already looking at Western Europe, Eastern Europe, looking at the Middle East and some other places. So they already were expanding, and I was already helping them.
So if you think about that, shift moving from Azerbaijan to Canada, and even the experiences that you had in terms of kind of what the banking infrastructure looked like, with some of the bones of HSBC, and then moving into the Canadian banking and finance system, was there some big shifts that you saw as you kind of made that leap over to the Canadian market?
I cannot say that there were big leaps, and that is why, as an immigrant who came here, and the typical question people will ask, do you have Canadian experience?
Yeah.
I found that, at least in the banking world, it wasn't as relevant as it is, let's say, maybe some other fields, like say like medical care, because the technology may be a bit different and whatnot. Whereas banking, it's the same type of financials that you're looking at and analyzing. The products are more or less the same. I mean, operating lines, term loans, deposits. So honestly, I didn't find the question of Canadian experience being as dominating in the banking world as it would be in some other fields. So the transition was not that difficult. Where I found the most difficult part is building a network, because when you're here from university times, you grow up with kids, you have your friends already working at other banks, so it's easier for that career progression perspective. But when you're building a network just from scratch, it becomes a little bit difficult because you don't know you, and the most important, not they don't know you. They don't know what type of a worker you are. They don't know your internal kind of guidance principles, so it becomes a bit more challenging.
And so that brings up a really interesting point. I had recorded another episode recently where we were talking about the power of networking and the power of some of those networks, especially as you're building your career or kind of going out on your own and launching new products or initiatives. Is that philosophy around networking, if you're thinking about your first, set of experiences in Azerbaijan, was the networking philosophy the same there as it is when you come to somewhere like Calgary?
It's actually very different in just this cultural aspect. Like, for example, um, if I were to ask a lady out for a coffee back home, uh, that would be a little bit unacceptable.
Oh, right.
And they would might say things like, I'm married or have a boyfriend. Like, why are you asking me
Yes.
for a
That's
coffee?
You're barking up the wrong, yeah.
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 Whereas here, it's a completely different thing, especially if you're reaching out to a person on LinkedIn, because 90%, maybe even 95% of the time, if you're reaching or someone is reaching out to you on LinkedIn, they have let's say, personal intentions from that perspective, right? Like,
Right.
they have more about professional perspective intentions to go to build your network because people are in different places. And here, especially in Calgary, what I found from a networking perspective, people respond. When you reach out on LinkedIn, people say, yes, let's go have a coffee. And once they are there, even if though they may not be the ones that are going to help you out, they still want to connect you with someone else who might, and kind of, spread the word. And I I lived in 4 different countries, and in Canada, Calgary, I found the best place to build a network. Like, the people are just amazing here.
I love it, and I might be a little biased as well, but I definitely feel the same way. How did you find that transition? So if you talk about some of those cultural differences, and if you were to ask, love this story, but if you ask someone out for a coffee, it could be perceived the wrong way.
Mhm.
You show up in Calgary. How did you start to build that networking muscle? Because if you kind of fast forward today, I would say that it's hard to go a couple steps in the kind of Calgary business network without bumping into someone that you're at least like 1 or 2 degrees connected away from.
Well, honestly, at the beginning, it was difficult. It was a lot of trial and error. I adapted my LinkedIn style quite a bit in terms of even the cold outreach and how do I cater those messages. Luckily, I found some good people along the way who also guided me and showcased, this is not the best way to put this message, or you have to adapt it in such a way, and that really helped out. I remember my first networking event, very awkward.
Yeah.
I was standing there with a glass of wine, looking at people and not knowing what to do
Yeah.
until someone approached me and started speaking to me. So it does kind of become difficult at the beginning, but the idea is be flexible. Don't be afraid when people provide you with feedback, because some people, when they receive feedback, they get offended by it.
Yeah.
But you're in a new country and there's different rules, and it's good that others are trying to show you the way. So allow them to show it.
Totally. And I guess the opposite is also true. So, bringing it over to the trade conversation, if I'm starting to try and do business globally, I would imagine that trying to use the same playbook that you grew your business within Calgary and taking that to a global market probably doesn't translate in the same way either.
I agree. I would also say, even if you're moving your business to a different province,
Yeah.
you're going to have different issues. And let's put the regularity side of things, just park that for a second. Let's talk about the culture, because if you're going to a different province, first of all, the business may be different, the way people sign a contract, or in Calgary, people typically like that handshake approach, where in some other places it may not be as applicable. If you go to the state, which is very similar culturally, each state would have different nuances as well. But when you go to different cultures, one of my favorite examples is, let's say in some cultures, when you give a gift, it is common that you open the gift in front of the
Yeah.
gift giver. Whereas in other cultures, you don't do that. You take the gift, say thank you, put it aside, and when everyone leaves, you open the gift then. Those type of small nuances are something a person should research before entering a new country. In addition, in some countries, it would be easier to sign a contract without ever meeting a person. In other countries, no, they want to have a sit down with you, maybe a drink with you, or something else. I remember my dad, he had a business venture in the 90s, and he was in one of the largest cities in Russia. And not just because like the proximity, Azerbaijan was part of the Soviet Union, so there's also like the language, like ease and understanding the business community. But one of the things, he was negotiating a deal, and before they even started talking, they poured him a glass of vodka and made him drink it.
Yeah.
Some stereotypes are true from
Yeah.
that sense, and maybe things have changed and evolved since the 90s. But that's what happened, and that's how he had to adapt to be able to get the business that he was looking to get at that point of time.
That's really interesting. Yeah, okay. The pre meeting vodka. I haven't gone through that one yet. We should have had a shot before the recording here.
Oh, 100%.
There we go.
I might have made, talk too much a little bit afterwards, but
It would have made for a more interesting episode. And so if you think about all of those nuances, then is that a lot of the work you do around kind of the cultural education with people you're working with, or is it the economic side? Like, how do people find that balance? Because I imagine the regulatory side, the compliance side, like it's linear, right? It's written down somewhere. It's probably easy to research, although it does take the work.
Yep.
But kind of how do you find that balance between the nuance of kind of cultural norms and the like check boxes of some of the regulatory norms?
So from the regulatory perspective, let's say if we're talking about EDC can do some of that basic regulatory search on behalf of the clients. So that's kind of on the easy side. Like you said, it's linear. You just need to have someone to be able to do the research on your behalf if you don't have the time. But the cultural one is a bit more difficult because cultures are not written down.
Yeah.
So the best thing is that, EDC, the Trade Commissioner Services, if we're talking about Alberta has a strong trade team as well. And all of these organizations have people in different countries. EDC has about 24, 25 different places, but then the Trade Commission is spread out as well. And then there's, the embassies of Canada in different places. So there are people who are in those markets who understand the culture. So I would always say to the businesses, don't be afraid to reach out to your trade commissioners, to talk to them and see how they can help you enter those new markets if you're looking for that. They can help you not just from perspective of the cultural aspect, but also getting you in touch with some people who you might sign a contract, or you might network with, and they can introduce to someone else and kind of expand and help you enter that new market.
I love it. So I'm going to pivot to a really dumb question, but I think it's an important one, just from a contextual standpoint. But like, why is global trade so important to the work that like is happening in the province here?
Well, global trade, I think, is important because it helps a company diversify. It goes back to that old adage about don't put all your eggs in the same basket. If you look at Canada, although a vast country, the market is limited just because of population. And let's say you're in the agriculture space. Like, you grow so much food, but Canada will never consume the amount of food that Canada itself grows because, again, back to the population. So you have to look at other markets. Plus, it helps you adapt because maybe there's a recession in Canada, but to a country that you're selling to, the same recession doesn't impact them. So now you have a strong market outside, and you can bring foreign dollars into Canada and help Canada's economy in general as well. It helps you from a perspective of having different sources of income and different currencies, because sometimes, well, we saw how the Canadian dollar devaluated a little bit last year. But if you have a source of income, let's say in USD or maybe euros, maybe that will help you manage the gap in terms of the devaluation of the Canadian dollar. So it helps the companies be more strong. Plus, I find that export is like a little bit of a mirror, so that the businesses and the business owners can look back at the business itself and say what is actually missing. Because when you're growing a business locally, you're doing it and you don't have enough time to fall back and see, am I all my systems in place? Do I have all the right licenses? Am I missing out on something? But when you export, all of those cracks become so much more evident, and you're going to say, oh my God, I actually need to fix this. And goes back to making your company stronger in Canada, not just abroad, because you saw all of those nuances when you try to export.
That's really interesting. So if you think about it, then it's really that almost holding the mirror back and saying, okay, well, if we expand to the U.S., which seems to be kind of the low-hanging fruit sometimes,
Yep.
which I feel like is probably a whole other podcast episode we could dive into the nuance there. But it's really kind of holding that mirror back and reflecting some of those exact things that you're talking about.
Yeah, and to your point, like Canada is dependent on the U.S. market. I think the last statistics were 74, 75%,
Yeah.
something along those lines. But I understand kind of the ease of it, right? Like you put things on a truck and then just ship it
Yeah.
to the U.S. and the culture is the same, the language is the same, and it does take a lot of effort to diversify. So hopefully, with the help of different organizations that already exist, Canadian businesses will start looking at other countries and try to make sure that not all of their eggs are in the same basket. I remember attending an event, and the economist who was presenting, he mentioned a very good idea or a very good comparison. He said, when you invest your own retirement money, you don't put it all into one stock. You diversify. And I think that's the same idea about selling and sales in general.
I think that makes sense. And so, like, one of the stories that I've kind of heard over and over again, like, and I know you're connected a little bit with the startup community here as well, is that like it's almost the chicken and the egg around kind of when's the best time to kind of cross those bridges.
Yeah.
And so we can use maybe some kind of excuse me. Excuse me. We'll edit that out, Zach.
Take a sip of water.
Yeah.
Too much talking today.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, so we can use some of those examples of like maybe some homegrown organizations, right? So I think you've heard the stories lots of like the oil and gas SaaS companies that have to go to the UAE or the States or somewhere else to get some of their first customers. But on the flip side, you hear a lot of organizations that just never even think that it's in the world of possibility for them to start to cross some of those international borders. And so if you were to advise an organization when the right time to start thinking about opening those doors is, like, is there a right time, or is it just so organizational dependent that kind of the answer is it depends?
Well, I guess I'm still a banker at heart, and I'm going to say it depends.
I knew that one was coming.
Well, if you look at startups, first of all, you have to understand what is that you're selling, because it could be a service, but it also could be a good. Sometimes the challenge is finding the first adapter, especially if you're trying to disrupt the market.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of companies start here,
Yeah.
but have challenges get that first customer, because that's going back to the conservatism in Canada.
Yeah.
And we have seen the same thing, right? Like it's the same idea of why we're so dependent on the States, because of that conservative approach. It's easy to go to the States. I think it's a trope that a lot of people have already passed. Whereas entering, let's say, a market that not a lot of people export to becomes a little bit difficult. So going back to like from that perspective, some companies will have an easier time going internationally because they will find their first customer who will say, oh, you know what? I'm willing to take a risk on you.
Right.
So if it's something of your first sale and you believe that that buyer will help you in terms of getting the business started, and sometimes you will see that will trickle down back to Canada. I remember this story about a lady starting a company here in the pipeline space, a tech company, and she was saying that no one wanted to adapt the technology, although everyone was talking about pipeline capacity, and their technology actually enhanced pipeline capacity by optimizing it, and no one adapted. So, but she found an adaptation in the States, and when she found the one in the States, some of those companies made the Canadian companies utilize that technology. So it was interesting to see how it trickled down still back to Canada. But there's no right time. It's more about, is the company itself prepared to do that leap? Because if you look back, let's say, if you're producing something in Canada, do you have the right licenses to ship to in your country?
Yeah.
If you don't, then maybe it's a bit too early. You need to make sure that you have all your licenses in place. The second question is, do you know the logistic routes? If you're unable to move the goods, then even if you have a sales contract, how are you going to get those things there? And sometimes you need to understand, okay, is it by ship? Is it by truck? Is it by airplane? Maybe airplane is going to be too expensive for you, and ship is a bit too long. So you have to understand the routes as well. The other thing is if it's services, for example, maybe it's easier. You just go online on a Teams meeting
Yeah.
and then just do that. So it all depends on the business. So I don't think there's a right or wrong time. It's more about, are you prepared to make sure that that sale is going to be successful for the business? Do you know the buyer well enough to trust them if you're small? Because one unpaid invoice can put the business under.
Yeah.
To give you an example, I had a client a while back where one unpaid invoice, just one, uh, was crucial enough to put the business under, and they had to file for bankruptcy.
Oh my gosh.
So, well, of course, if you're doing 10 million, you have 1,000,
Yeah.
like an invoice worth $1,000. Maybe that's will not affect it. You will be able to absorb it.
Yeah.
But if you have a $10 million company, you have 1 million outstanding. That's going to put a strain on your cash flow and, of course, impact the business.
Totally. So is that one of the big pitfalls that you see people make as they're considering some of these global entries, is that they just haven't done some of that legwork yet? They just get, I don't want to say the easy part is the sale, but they go and they kind of get the big PO or the big statement of work, and everyone celebrates and high fives, and then they don't have that infrastructure in place to actually support that customer properly yet.
Yeah, I agree. Like, there's usually that's kind of the case. Is yes, they get happy, they get excited the PO, but they cannot perform on that.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have enough machinery. Maybe they need to hire some more people. Or maybe they got 3 POs from 3 different countries, and now there's too stretched and don't know how to prioritize. Or maybe they didn't do the research and their goods got stuck in the customs, and now they have to pay demurrage fees. So there's so many things that can go wrong. My favorite example that I've learned when I moved here is the example of Target. When Target expanded into Canada, like, we know how Target is successful in the US and how everyone goes to Target, and it's a big thing.
Yeah.
And when I visited the US a year back, and for the first time, one of the places I went to Target to see, like, what is this everyone is talking about? And then when they tried to enter the Canadian markets, they made every single mistake in the book about entering an international market. They assume that because it's Canada, it's going to be the same, but so many mistakes. And one of the simplest ones that comes first to mind, their ERP system mixed up the metric system with the imperial system. Yes, exactly. So some of their goods arrived in like centimeters, and some of their goods arrived in inches. And then when I tried to put them on shelves, it all was a mess. So you have to do your legwork.
Yeah, I think my wife still has FOMO from not having Target here. I know that same as you. Each time we go down there, we do the obligatory Target trip. It's always a good time. And so what are some of the things you see companies do really well then? Like, maybe logically it's just the inverse of those things you were talking about. But if you're seeing someone really do those entries in a meaningful way and feeling some of the momentum come from it, like, what are some of the things that set great apart from good?
I would say, in my opinion, that what sets them apart is the ability to double down on what they do well. Like, for example, I know that Canadian companies have a lot of success in the Middle East. I'm talking about like the oil and gas space, because the experience in Canada, the engineers that people have in Canada, or the companies have in Canada, all of that adds up to the experience that those businesses in the Middle East are going to get. So they're able to sell that story. The same thing in agriculture. Lately, I'm seeing more and more traction in agricultural products, um, and demand rising in like the Asia Pacific region, because they like the Canadian quality. So Canada already has good quality standards in different fields, like, well, top of the world, like, if you look at that, both from an ESG perspective, both from the way of the technologies utilized and the people that are working there. The people are, diligent, and they don't do work just to get out of it. They make sure that everything is working perfectly. So just double down on what we do good already, and kind of let the world know more about it. I think that's kind of what we need to double down on.
It makes sense. I was at an event the other night, and it was a AI and mining event. So really interesting kind of roundtable discussion and topic. And one of the things that I don't think I even fully had an appreciation for was exactly what you were saying, which is when you start to go into some of these overseas market, the respect and brand, especially on the kind of engineering side of things here in Canada. We have some of the best kind of engineering and technical talent in the world. It sounds like, especially if they're going through some of our education programs, it is respected on a global stage, which I think sometimes we sell ourselves a little bit short on.
Oh, I agree with that sentiment. I think like that goes back to like Canadians being humble.
Yeah.
And that I think there's a fine line, and this is actually something I learned here, is you have to sing your own praises.
Yeah.
Like back home, for example, even when we were doing the annual reviews and all that, like it's not common for you to brag about yourself.
Yeah.
And here I found that no, you actually need to learn how to tell your own story, and that's what Canada needs to do a bit better, is telling its own story about how things are done and why our products are better. And people will recognize that. And to continue with the example of agriculture, for example, let's say some of the products that we sell, from my understanding, is those same products will not that are produced in the US will not be sold in the same markets, because US farmers add more GMOs and other kinds of products into the feed system to the, let's say, the cows, so the milk is not as clean as Canadian milk, and in some of those markets those things will be bad, whereas Canada, it's cleaner,
Right.
and they like Canadian goods.
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of start to work it back through that supply chain side and everything that fits into it. You brought up a really interesting point around the kind of humbleness. You mentioned earlier around some of the risk aversion. Like, do you think, and I know this is a broad generalization, that we're thinking too small in terms of a, Canadian economy?
You mean like too small as the Canadian economy might be bigger, or?
I think if we think about, maybe we'll bring it back to some of the founders and some of the people that are running these businesses and making these bets and really going for it. Do you think the aspirations are sometimes too small or too muted based on what the world can look like when we start to open some of those global doors?
I think so. Like personally, I do believe that a lot of businesses or business owners, they're satisfied with what they have, which is not a bad thing. A success to different people means different things. To some people, it means, going and becoming a unicorn.
Yeah.
But I think that is also driven with a lot of propaganda and like the media.
Yeah.
That, if you're not making $1 million a year, like you're not successful. Like, no, like to some people, that's not the case. Like some people, success is having a strong family, spending more time with their kids and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I like that Canada doesn't defy success by other standards and kind of has its own standards of what success should like. But at the same time, I think sometimes that may be the reason why the aspirations are not as high. So, I'm making my buck and I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
I'm not overworking myself. But like even from the perspective of work, like the ethics in US, from a perspective of how much time off you get. I've heard wild stories about people getting a surgery and returning back to work the next day. Maybe that's a bit too much on the other side.
Yeah. So we need to find that balance as a people and kind of society of figuring out where it works for everyone.
Exactly.
And I guess where it works for everyone individually as well, too, because it's not the same recipe for everyone, too.
And I think age matters as well. Like when I was 20,
Yeah.
like I had a different stamina for work.
Yeah.
And plus I had zero responsibilities outside of work, so I could really focus on that. Right now, though, it's a different stage of life. I have kids, so there's others. So I joke, I take off my corporate hat, I put on my Uber hat, and drive kids around at night.
Oh, there you go. Hopefully, you have a 5-star rating.
Well, sometimes they do give me 5 stars, sometimes not so much.
Yeah.
Sometimes they roll their eyes like, "Dad, you made another dad joke."
There you go. How many Uber drivers do you get to make jokes though? That's perfect.
Yeah.
But I get it. Like I have a young daughter too, and like I think that. When I was starting my career, same thing. I probably worked too much, and I think now like there's just different priorities. There's different balance. You get energy from different things.
Exactly, and I think that's what should be taken into account. But getting back to your question, yes, I think there's a lot of possibilities for Canadian businesses, not just locally but globally.
Yeah, and so if you think about the accelerator that is AI right now. from everything from a product development standpoint, kind of making your dreams come true, but also opening the doors and kind of what's possible. How do you think, it could be from the portfolio of companies you're working with or just even from your general experience, how do you think AI is going to start to shape that conversation that you're having?
Well, that's a very broad topic,
Yeah.
but let's focus on international trade
Yeah.
in particular. I guess the biggest question is, how do you use AI? Like it goes back to what a lot of people are talking about, and like the ethical use of AI, and remembering that AI is not an answer, but it's a tool. I think that's the most important thing. You can use it to go and find information that you might spend more time to find. You might, but it might hallucinate and give you false answers. So you have to know how to verify that as well. Like even from a cultural perspective, you can go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, I'm thinking about entering the Chinese market. What do I need to know about the cultural aspects in China?"
Yeah.
And it might give you good answers, but it might also mislead you depending on the context that you're giving it, because potentially one part of China may have different nuances than the other part of China. So goes back again to garbage in, garbage out. So you have to know the prompt that you're giving in and trying to understand. My hope is that with international trade, it's going to become a bit less paperwork. To give you an example, one of the oldest mechanisms in international trade is trading via documentary credits. This mechanism has been around for more than 150 years, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It has changed slightly in the sense that now you can do electronic signatures, and there's banks like HSBC that are trying to digitalize that route by adapting like blockchain technologies, but it takes time, because what happens is you have to make sure that all of those platforms in the supply chain are in the blockchain platform for them to utilize and talk to each other. If one ingredient is out, let's say the transportation company, then the system is broken now. So hopefully AI will help accelerate those kind of initiatives to make sure that when we're trading internationally, it becomes, first of all, easier and safer. Because if you look at statistics globally, and I'm just trying to remember the precise number, but I do remember that it's less than 5%. Less than 5% of all global trade is checked. So the containers are open and checked what's inside the container. So
Really?
potentially, if there's AI, then there's opportunities to make sure that, there's nothing illegal being transported in those containers.
That's fascinating. So that is an alarming stat too. So if you think about the trade of everything, there's a lot of unknown of kind of what's traversing our seas at the moment.
Oh, 100%. A lot of unknowns, and some of those unknowns are like very negative unknowns. I mean, without going into the details of what it can be. Well, as others can be just slightly bad because, like, for example, overstating the amounts and then, writing off some money and whatnot. So there's could be different things, but hopefully with AI and with those kind of control technologies, there will be an opportunity to clean up that and decrease the amount of bad things circulating on the globe. At least I'm optimistic.
Yeah,
Let's say.
I can already tell you're the optimist here. And so if there was because there's a couple of things I do want to chat through as well, but if you were to want to leave everyone with one thing around the opportunity that sits in front of them with global trade, like I know that the world is a tumultuous place right now. What's the one thing you just wish everyone kind of walked away knowing with the work that you're doing and the insights that you have?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that international trade is not as scary as it may look.
Yeah.
There may be, new documents that will arise, like the bill of lading, if you never shipped before and always put things on a truck. But there are experts in different fields that will help you navigate. There's different types of insurances to make sure that you will not fail. And I think that's the most important thing, is not to be afraid to try.
Yeah. Just take the swing.
Just take the swing, but make a calculated guess. That's the thing. Like, I'm not a person that is a fan of non-calculated risk.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, not to boil it down to its simplest component. But I feel like that's all business is taking the swing of the calculated risk.
Exactly, exactly. At the end of the day, it is. It just sometimes it feels like it's not,
Yeah.
but the successful business people usually calculate before
Yeah.
the risk, and they say, okay, I can take this.
Well, and that's, I get the luxury of talking to a lot of really interesting people in that chair right there. And I think that a lot of successful business people, I think, look at it in that way, which is business is one big game of risk management.
Oh, 100%. And I would also add to that an ever evolving game of risk management.
Yes.
Because the risk that is happening today may not be happen tomorrow, but more commonly,
Yeah.
it's that everything that was smooth sailing until today, tomorrow something may happen and it can change. For example, like we're talking about tariffs and whatnot, but what happened was interesting that now there are retaliatory things happening. Like Mexico, for example, changed some of their regulations. And I know that because now some companies, they need additional documentation to be able to get paid, even if they're not US companies. But maybe some of their supply chain is in the US. So it takes more time for them to get paid, and that impacts their cash flow. So what I'm trying to say is that even if something that you may think that will not impact you, there's a domino effect.
Well, and I've been wrestling with this myself, and talking to a lot of different leaders around it, which is, how do you keep up with all of the global nuance, and then start to try and map out what are the downstream impacts of everything, right? So you can see the layer one effects of some of the tariffs, but then you start to think about some of the regulatory changes and retaliation that do have material impact, especially if it pushes out your payables by an extra 2 weeks.
That's the thing. It's very hard to control that. You have to be online all the time to see what's
Yeah.
happening on the news. Honestly, this may sound bad, but I try to avoid the news as much as
Yeah.
possible because there's so much noise as well. Because the biggest question is now, it's not just about knowing the information, but also is to understanding which of that information is something reliable and not reliable. Is it an opinion? Is it an expert saying that? Is it a fact? So it's hard to differentiate what's the reality anymore.
And there's such an information overload too, right? Like I think that there's no shortage of content, data, opinions, fact, validated research that coming your way. And so it's a little bit of a mental exercise to say, like, what do I filter out? What do I not? And how do I keep on top of it?
Exactly. And to that, I will say, try reading The Brave New World by Aldous Huxley.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Because one of the things he wrote in that particular book is exactly that the world will have so much information it will be very hard to navigate the influx of it.
I'm going to have to go back to that one. I feel like I read that many, many years ago, but maybe I'll add it to the reread list.
It's on one of my favorite books. It's actually one of the books I brought with me back home, from back home.
Really?
Yeah, I had a phase of reading dystopian future books.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I love them. And but this one stuck more with me.
I feel like you and I are going to be fast friends. I feel like that's, if you ask even my wife, like, what do I read and what do I watch movies about? Like, I'm all about the end of the world hero saga. What happens afterwards? How do people rebuild?
That's the thing. How do people rebuild afterwards? But hopefully, again, I'm an optimist. I hope that we will not get to a dystopian future.
Yeah.
I don't believe in utopia either. I just believe in a world where people can coexist.
I love it. And so I do want to take some time to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that we're both podcasters. And so it's not very often I get to have a fellow podcaster on the show too. So tell me a little bit about your podcast. Like what do you do? What stories do you tell?
So thank you for actually bringing that up. And it's called the Global Nomads Podcast, and goes back to, again, what I just said, is that people coexisting.
Yeah.
Because one thing I find is the more I talk to different people from different backgrounds, is we're all very similar. Like, this is how much different we are, in the sense that maybe we have a different salad in our celebration, or maybe the way we dance is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, we're all humans, and there's so much commonalities. Even if you look, like, for example, like, say, I'm from Azerbaijan. But I had a colleague when I was at HSBC who was from India, and we were talking. There's so many similar words in Azerbaijani and Hindu, and one would never know. But all of those words come from either Arabic or Persian. Those similarities. So that means that at one point of time, it was all part of the same ecosystem. And when you look at that, like, yes, we're all the same. We're all humans. We all want the same thing. The news sometimes want to divide us, but that's a different reason. There's reasons why it is done. So what I want to do through the podcast is first of all tell immigrant stories, positive immigrant stories that people come here, people building from scratch, and give them advice. Because again, through my networking, I talk to a lot of people, and I find that either they lack the knowledge, so I want to do the same as people did for me to help them understand the Canadian ecosystem. I want to make sure that they know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because that's the most difficult part. And lastly, I want to show that there's a lot of immigrants who come to Canada and they're building together, integrating into society, bringing something positive from their own culture, accepting something positive from the Canadian culture and from the surrounding cultures of Canada as well, because it's a melting pot of different cultures. And do that, because having coffees with everyone, I don't have enough time animiore.
It's and another. I feel like I struggle with a lot of things, but that exact thing you could fill up your calendar, I'm sure, every single day with 10 hours of coffees.
Exactly.
Be the most well caffeinated person in Calgary, but
yeah, be hyperactive.
Yeah, you'd get so much done in the half hour before the caffeine crash.
Yeah.
But I love that perspective, because our whole country was built on people coming together with different perspectives.
Yep.
And I think that there's such an opportunity, and I love what you're doing and showcasing some of those stories too. Because the world, and I think this is something that everyone kind of forgets sometimes, the world's much bigger than Calgary.
Yep.
And I think that we all become better when you kind of have those unique perspectives that come together. And so thank you for doing that as well.
And it sets also actually works for the workplace as well.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if let's say there's 5 people trying to solve the same problem, but they only have the same background, it's hard for them to go, and this is an overused word, but go and look at the things outside the box. But if you bring someone else, an expert from the same field, but who had different experience, maybe there can be a breakthrough. So how do you make sure that you leverage that as well?
Totally. Well, I love to tell the story. We have a gentleman on our team. He, I think he moved to Calgary. He came here in the 80s and left, went back home, and then came back again 3 or 4 years ago. But he's worked on some of the world's largest data center and construction projects, multi-billion-dollar projects. And that experience, but as soon as he came here, he had to struggle getting a job.
Yep.
And that experience, we had as soon as it gets brought into a project or a scenario or one of those rooms, it's just super eye-opening, because they've solved challenges in a different way and potentially at a different scale. And opening the door to some of those conversations and that talent is just always a good thing.
It is. And the same story with myself. Even recently, something that happened, I got feedback that you lack leadership experience. I'm like, yeah, but I was head of commercial banking. Is that not leadership experience enough?
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to put too fine of a point on it, but I imagine some of the numbers are different too.
Yes.
Yeah. In a good way there. But I feel like we've covered so much ground here today, Samir. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about? Because I feel like we've gone all over the place. Global trade podcast.
I think yes, we made a lot of ground, but I'm gonna say that putting it all together, both from a trade perspective, both from the podcast perspective, I think that at the end of the day, it all goes down to community building. If you have a strong community around you, be that with the business, I have great examples where business owners would utilize their immigrant communities who work for them, and with them find new opportunities for the business, enter new markets. But also, when you're an immigrant, building that first community at the beginning is the most important thing, and just showing people that you're welcome here. I think that is very important, and that is sometimes not missed. Like I said, Calgary is very good for that, but people forget that we all had to start from somewhere, and one helping hand can make a big difference in someone else's life.
So you mentioned earlier around kind of some of those different definitions of success.
Yeah.
So if you think about kind of your definition of success, is it really in building that community, or kind of like what is that? There's never a finish line,
Hmm.
but what's that success metric for you that you're marching towards and makes you get up in the morning?
For me right now, the success metric would be, first of all, be that person to like that people reach out to, continue being open. Like I think I'm known for being an
Yeah.
open person, so hopefully that will not change. But also the most important thing is, as my kids get older, like they're 12 and 8 right now, to become a role model for them. I think that's the most important, to showcase to them, not through talks, because sometimes parents do educate their kids, but only by speech, but not actually walking the walk. So I hope to be someone who is showing them how to be an open person and how to be a person of the community. And that's kind of what success would mean to me in today's world.
Fantastic. Samir, if someone wanted to track you down, they wanted to fill up your schedule with one of the 10 hours of coffees, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I would say LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the best way. Some of the questions already I would say would already be on the podcast. So it's on YouTube and Spotify. Like I said, the Global Nomads podcast. But my LinkedIn is my second best friend, and I'm very responsive there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate you coming down. This has been an absolute privilege to have you on, and I appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. If you've made it this far, like and subscribe on YouTube, or follow and leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss any future episodes.